In the Daily Bugle newsroom, the usual morning chaos was unfolding. Peter Parker stood in front of J. Jonah Jameson's office, nervously fiddling with the strap of his backpack, where his Spider-Man suit was hidden. Through the glass walls, he could see the editor-in-chief gesturing wildly at some unfortunate reporter. Yesterday's chase after criminals had left Peter with no usable photos for the paper, and now he had to explain himself. Employees bustled back and forth, creating the familiar atmosphere of a typical workday morning. Someone had spilled coffee on important documents, someone else was loudly discussing the latest city incidents, and a young intern was struggling in vain to fix a jammed printer. Peter watched all this commotion, thinking about how difficult it was to juggle a regular job and superhero duties, especially when your boss was obsessed with uncovering the truth about Spider-Man. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Aunt May reminding him to buy groceries for dinner. One more item on the endless to-do list of a seemingly ordinary guy trying to live an extraordinary life. "Parker!" Jameson's voice thundered, making not only Peter but half the newsroom jump. "Get in here before I change my mind and throw you out right now! And if you don't have sensational photographs, you can start looking for a new job." "Where are the photos, Parker? I gave you a simple assignment, to capture the bank robbery. Even an intern would have done a better job." Jameson drummed his fingers on the desk, glaring at Peter. On his desk lay the latest editions of rival newspapers, each one with blurry photos of the previous day's events. "Mr. Jameson, Peter hesitated, unable to explain that he'd been too busy stopping the robbers in his Spider-Man suit at the time. Memories of the day flashed through his mind, people screaming, the sound of breaking glass, 3 armed criminals threatening hostages. He had needed to act quickly, and the choice between saving people and taking pictures was obvious. "I was there, but the angle? Jameson leaped up, his face turning crimson. He grabbed one of the newspapers and waved it in front of Peter's nose. "Even amateurs with phones took more pictures than you. And you, my staff photographer, come back empty-handed. Do you know how many times I've stuck my neck out for you with the board of directors? Parker's got talent, I told them. The kid's got a special nose for news, I insisted. And now what?" Peter felt his face growing hot. He truly was grateful to Jameson for giving him this job, an opportunity to earn money and help Aunt May. But how could he explain that sometimes you have to sacrifice your career when lives are on the line? Leaving the office, Peter heard Betty Brant's sympathetic whisper. "Don't take it personally. He's tearing everyone apart today. Besides, you're the only one who ever manages to get such amazing Spider-Man shots." If only she knew. Peter managed a faint smile as he sat on the edge of her desk. Everyone in the newsroom knew he somehow managed to capture Spider-Man in the most incredible angles. Some even joked that he must have a teleporter to make it to every scene in time. It wasn't Jameson's criticism that was weighing on him. Peter felt that his double life was starting to unravel. How could he be both hero and photographer at once, especially when the city needed Spider-Man now more than ever? The past few weeks had been particularly rough, a series of robberies, new supervillains, and endless problems faced by ordinary people in need of help. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an alert about an emergency in the city center. Peter glanced at Jameson's office, where the boss was already berating someone else, then at his backpack with the suit inside. The choice was once again obvious. "Sorry, Betty, I've got to run. Tell Jameson I'm working on a scoop, okay?" Peter raced through the streets of Manhattan, weaving among pedestrians and street vendors. Police sirens were getting closer to the city center. News alerts on his phone reported yet another armed bank robbery. But this time, it was more serious. The criminal wore a mechanical suit and had already wounded 2 guards. "Let me get there in time," Peter thought, searching for a place to change clothes. Panic-stricken people ran past. Somewhere in the distance glass was shattering. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a familiar photographer from a rival paper rushing to the scene, another reminder that Peter was missing yet another chance to take sensational pictures for Jameson. In a narrow alley between 2 skyscrapers, Peter hurriedly changed into his Spider-Man suit. His hands trembled slightly from the adrenaline. A news helicopter roared overhead, a reminder that time was running out. Peter paused for a second, staring at the mask in his hands. Another workday, another decision between his job and his duty. He recalled Uncle Ben's words about great power and great responsibility. They never lost their meaning, especially in moments like these. Aunt May would understand if he was late for dinner again. She always did, even if she never knew the real reason for his constant disappearances and tardiness. A moment later, Spider-Man was soaring above the city streets, swinging on his web between skyscrapers. Chaos reigned below. Police cars were blocking streets, people were running in panic, and sounds of a struggle came from inside the bank. Peter quickly sized up the situation. Apparently, the criminal in the mechanical suit was still inside the building. "Karen, scan the building," Peter said, activating his suit's systems. "I need to know how many people are inside and where our mechanical friend is located." Descending toward the bank, he noticed several reporters setting up their cameras. Among them he spotted a familiar face, Eddie, who had once nearly exposed his secret. Sometimes Peter wondered if he should just reveal his identity, but he always remembered the risks that would bring to those he cared about. In the hospital corridor, a tense hush prevailed, punctuated only by the beeping of medical equipment and the muffled voices of doctors. Spider-Man stood by the entrance to the emergency room where the wounded from the bank robbery were being treated. 2 guards had sustained serious injuries, and though Peter had managed to avert the worst, he couldn't shake his sense of guilt. Nurses shot curious glances his way but stayed professional. He was the city's hero to them, but right now Peter felt more like a tired teenager who hadn't been able to prevent a tragedy completely. Back in his street clothes, Peter sat in the waiting room until Aunt May arrived. She immediately noticed his exhausted look and the traces of a recent scuffle that he hadn't managed to hide. "Peter! I saw the news and knew I'd find you here," Aunt May said, taking a seat beside him and gently placing her hand on his shoulder. "Were you trying to photograph what happened for the paper?" Peter gave a faint smile. If only she knew that her nephew wasn't photographing the hero. He was the hero. "Yeah, but I didn't manage to get decent shots. It all happened so fast." They stood by the room where one of the injured guards lay. Through the glass window, they could see his family, his wife and 2 teenage children, by his side. Peter felt a pang in his heart. "You know," Aunt May said quietly, watching the family scene, "your Uncle Ben always said that a true hero isn't someone who never falls, but someone who always finds the strength to get back up, even when everyone seems to be against you." Peter swallowed hard. Those words felt especially relevant now, as he tried to balance his ordinary life with his duties as a hero. The events of the day had shown him it was sometimes impossible to be perfect in both roles, Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But he could at least try to do his best in whichever role needed him most. His phone vibrated yet again, another demand from Jameson, wanting an explanation for his absence. But that could wait. Right now, it was more important for Peter to be here, where people needed him. "Let's go home, Aunt May," he said softly. "It's been a long day." Leaving the hospital, Peter stopped by a large window overlooking the evening city. The skyscraper's lights glowed in the deepening dusk, and the sound of distant sirens lingered. New York never slept, and its protector couldn't afford to rest for long either. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not managing anything," Peter said quietly, half to himself. "I try to do everything at once, but in the end, you do everything you can." Aunt May interrupted gently. "And you know what? That's enough. You can't be perfect at everything, Peter. You just have to stay a person who tries to do what's right." Peter smiled, feeling the day's tension start to ease. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new choices. Maybe he still wouldn't be able to take the perfect photos Jameson wanted. Maybe he'd have to choose between his job and his duty yet again. But now he understood a simple truth: it doesn't matter whether you're wearing a superhero's mask or just trying to get through a normal day, you have to stay true to yourself and your principles. Somewhere in the city, a camera flash flickered, another reporter on the hunt for a sensational story. Peter knew his own story would never appear on the front page. It was just the story of a regular guy who learned every day how to balance ordinary life with extraordinary responsibility. But perhaps real heroism lies exactly in that, carrying on, even when it seems impossible. "Let's go home," Peter repeated, putting his arm around Aunt May's shoulders. "You promised to make your famous walnut pie." And the city carried on with its own life, oblivious that its hero was simply heading home for dinner, readying himself for the next day and the next challenges. Because sometimes, the most important victories aren't won in epic battles, but in the quiet moments when you just do what you must. This story reminds us that true courage is found not only in grand heroic deeds, but also in everyday decisions. The ability to keep going despite difficulties and setbacks. And each of us, like Peter Parker, can be the hero of our own story.